Ready? Counselor, is there anything we need to address before we resume for the afternoon? Okay, that I see.
Judge, I had an opportunity to discuss with my client how the autopsy photos were going to be shown. He's okay with the procedure that we're using.
Okay. Ms. Hawthorne, any objections?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
Mr. All right. The object of what I suggested obviously was some measure of sensitivity to the material. I do want to take this opportunity to address the folks in the gallery that are watching the trial. I know you have experienced some difficulty moving in and out of the courtroom. That's not the sheriff's fault, that's my fault. They're following directions that I gave to them about how this trial was going to be conducted. The most important thing that needs to happen here for the next 2 weeks is that the 14 people over here have a fair opportunity to hear the evidence and to make an informed decision without being distracted, without feeling like they are being pushed some direction or another. I want them to focus on the evidence. That's the best chance of justice being done in the case. So I ask you to please keep in mind that what the deputies are asking you to do coming in and out of the courtroom is on instruction from me. I don't want people walking in and out the door while witnesses are testifying. In between witness testimony, certainly, you can move in and out of the courtroom. But keep in mind, we have limited space here. If you get up and leave between a witness, somebody else may walk in and take the seat that you're in. And if that happens, that happens. There are only so many seats in the courtroom, okay? So all of you, please keep that in mind, and then we will proceed. All right, let's return the juries. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Everybody's nodding. Good. State, call your next witness.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Have a seat. Mr. McCourt.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name for the court reporter?
Yes, I'm Dr. Wendy Lavezzi, Lavezzi.
And what is your occupation?
I'm the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the District 5 Medical Examiner's Office in Leesburg, Florida.
How long have you been employed in that role?
Since February of 2008.
How long have you practiced medicine?
I graduated medical school in 1999, so since then.
How long have you been an assistant medical examiner for?
I've been an assistant medical examiner since my fellowship ended in 2005 in Chicago.
Where did you attend medical school?
At Albany Medical Center in Albany, New York.
And prior to attending medical school, did you work in the medical field?
I did.
In what capacity?
I was a registered nurse for 15 years before I went to medical school.
In addition to attending medical school, can you tell the jury what other education you have to be a doctor?
Sure. I got a bachelor's degree in Rhode Island. That's where I was practicing nursing at the time. And then I went on to medical school in Albany, New York.
And following medical school, did you have fellowships and residencies?
Yes, I did my residency in Albany at the Albany Medical Center in anatomical and clinical pathology. And then I went to Chicago to do my fellowship in forensic pathology.
And after doing your fellowship, what did you do?
I stayed in Chicago and worked at the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office as an assistant medical examiner for 2.5 years after fellowship.
And after that is when you came to Florida?
Yes.
Do you hold any board certifications?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what those are?
Yes, I'm board certified in anatomical pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
Are you a member of any professional associations?
Yes, several.
Okay, can you tell the jury if you know what those are? If you know.
There are many. The American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the National Association of Medical Examiners, several local societies. I'm currently the president of the Lake Sumter Medical Society in Lake County. Other pathology organizations, the Academy of Clinical Pathology and the College of American Pathologists.
Do you undergo continuing education for your work?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about that?
Yes, Florida requires physicians to have 40 continuing educational units every 2 years to renew their license.
And working at the medical examiner's office, tell the jury what your duties are there.
Well, to do autopsies, basically, to determine why someone died and what the manner of death was. We testify in court. I lecture quite a bit to the community and other agencies about forensic pathology. I'm on several committees with the Trauma Center here in Ocala to feed back to those trauma surgeons causes of death in their patients after they've been there, among other things.
What is the purpose of performing an autopsy?
The autopsy provides us information to determine the cause of death, which is why somebody died, and the manner of death. It can assist in that, which are the circumstances around the death.
Do you often perform more autopsies in your
Yes.
position?
Yes.
Approximately how many autopsies have you performed in your career, if you know?
About 4,000 now.
And are all autopsies you perform related to homicides?
No.
Okay. What other types of autopsy, or what other situations may you be required to perform an autopsy?
Well, the medical examiner takes jurisdiction of any case that dies of unnatural causes. So if you have an accident, or you commit suicide, or you die of a homicide, then you are a medical examiner case. Not everybody has a physician, so sometimes we will take jurisdiction of people that have apparent natural causes too. Someone has to sign your death certificate. In those cases, we may or may not do an autopsy depending on the circumstances or family preference or what's going on with the people as well as how old they are.
Do you also look into drugs related or deaths related to drug overdoses or accidents and that type of thing?
Yes.
You mentioned pathology. What is pathology?
Pathology is basically the study of diseases and disease processes.
What is forensic pathology?
Forensic pathology is a subspecialty. So there are two main branches of pathology, anatomical pathology and clinical pathology. Anatomical pathology is the study of physical diseases. So if you have something taken out of you by a surgeon, an organ or a tumor, that will go to a pathologist to determine what's wrong with it. And then we communicate that back to the surgeon or whoever did that. So any tissue specimens, those are anatomical pathology. Someone that has an autopsy in the hospital that died of natural causes, that would be anatomical pathology. Fluid specimens, pap smears, all of those things fall under the branch of anatomical pathology. Clinical pathology is laboratories and laboratory studies. So the microbiology laboratory, the blood bank, the toxicology laboratory, those are all clinical pathology. Forensic pathology is a subspecialty of anatomical pathology, which takes the autopsy even further to understand things that people that die of unnatural causes, so accidents, suicides, homicides, and those injuries that can go with those things.
How many autopsies have you performed where the cause of death is homicide?
Probably at least 10% of the 4,000, if not more.
Have you ever previously testified as an expert in the field of forensic anatomical pathology?
Yes,
On how many occasions?
about 70.
At this time, Your Honor, I would tender the witness for cross-examination regarding her qualifications to render an opinion in that field.
No questions, Your Honor.
We would accept her as an expert.
We would so accept.
Dr. Lavezzi will be permitted to give her opinion in the field of forensic pathology.
Dr. Lavezzi, can you explain to the jury how an autopsy is performed?
Sure. We would receive the body from the scene by our transport people in a body bag. Depending on the case, we may do some x-rays before the body's taken out of the body bag, as we're done in this case. When someone's been shot, we want to make sure that we get x-rays before they're taken out in case the projectiles are within the body bag. We don't want to lose that evidence, so just to get an idea of what we're dealing with. Once those x-rays are finished, we would take the body out of the body bag after having photographed it as received, as is, take the body out of the body bag, photograph again, and then look for any injuries. We usually photograph them before they're cleaned. After everything's photographed and documented that way, we would clean the body and look at it again, documenting everything from hair color and eye color to scars and tattoos to injuries. So everything about the body gets documented. Once all that is finished, we would open the body, take specimens for toxicology testing, usually at least blood and urine, and then look at the organs as they are in the body before we take anything out. So in a gunshot wound case, try to determine the trajectory of the bullet through the body and what's been injured before we start manipulating anything too much. Once that's been determined, we can take the organs out and look at them both for the presence of injury and for any natural diseases they might have as well. And that's pretty much an autopsy.
Ultimately, do you issue a death certificate?
Yes.
I want to direct your attention back to September 13th of 2015. Did you perform an autopsy that day on a woman who was identified to you as Benitria Robinson?
I did.
Was that autopsy assigned a unique case number for your office?
It was.
You know the case number.
I will if I look at my file.
Would you like to?
Yes.
Thank you.
The case number is 2015-1132.
When did the medical examiner's office first become involved with this particular case?
I believe we were notified right around the time she was shot, somewhere around 1:30 in the morning on this same day, and my investigator got there at approximately 2:45 in the morning, I think.
Is that one of that person's responsibilities to transport the decedent to the medical examiner's office?
Well, the investigator works with law enforcement at the scene, collects any evidence on the body at the scene, and then our transport people will take the body from there.
At what time did you perform the autopsy on Ms. Robinson?
At 9 a.m.
Prior to performing the autopsy, do you review any materials?
I review anything that's prepared. So if my investigator's report has been written by then, I would read that, look at any photographs that my investigators took at the scene. So anything I have.
And can you tell the jury when you did the external examination? First you said there was an x-ray that would have been done.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what the x-ray revealed?
Sure. We did x-rays of her head and her chest. And looks like there was a projectile near her left eye over here on the cheek, and there's a projectile near the medial right clavicle, which is the collarbone, so right in this area.
Can you tell the jury what the findings were of your external examination?
Yes. She was a 65-inch, 144-year-old, 144 pounds, compatible with the stated age of 19 years. She was really unremarkable as far as a lot of scars or tattoos. She had a few scars on her extremities, nothing major. She did have a gunshot wound above her left ear, and she had another one in the left back.
Did she have some type of paper bag or piece of paper around her wrist?
She did. She had a band around the right wrist stating underage.
Now, you described there being a gunshot wound near her left ear. Can you tell the jury where that was located?
Yes, just above the left ear. It was a diagonal wound, 3 3/4 inches beneath the top of the head and 5 3/4 inches to the left of the anterior midline. It was a 1 by 5/8 inch diagonal laceration that curved downward anteriorly. There's a 1/8 inch rim of patchy marginal abrasion. When a projectile strikes the skin, it will cause an abrasion around the wound because it's dragging the skin in as it goes in. So she did have that. There was no soot or gunpowder stippling around the wound. If a wound is fired at very close range, then some other things that exit the muzzle of the gun, like some soot or some unburned grains of gunpowder, can strike the skin and leave marks. She didn't have that. She did, however, have some hair extensions in that area, so that could absorb things like that. She also had a laceration just behind the helix of the ear, which is this part, a 1/2 by 1/4 inch laceration that corresponded to that gunshot wound, and a small laceration anterior to the left ear. So basically, this gunshot wound was sort of a tangential wound. So it went in superficially. There's a muscle right here called the temporal muscle, and it did lacerate that. It did cause a skull fracture that showed intertable beveling up here on the posterior end and outer table beveling here, which tells me as a pathologist that the projectile went this way, okay?
You're pointing kind of in a
I'm pointing
downward?
downward and anteriorly, yes, toward the front. We did recover a projectile just lateral to her left eye, right in the vicinity of that. So basically, the projectile did cause a fracture that caused damage to her brain in that area. So she did have a laceration on the brain on this side, partially from the bone fragments going in there, and some blood on that side of her head. And then the projectile was right lateral to the left eye.
In addition to the gunshot wound above the left ear, did you see gunshot wounds elsewhere on her body?
Yes, she had one in the left side of the back, 13 1/8 inches beneath the top of the head, and 3.5 inches to the left of the posterior midline. It was a 1/2 by 1/4 inch D-shaped perforation surrounded by a 1/16 to 1/4 inch marginal abrasion, most prominent in the 8 o'clock position. So we look at gunshot wounds like they're a clock. Okay, so the hole is a clock if the body's standing straight up and down. And at 8 o'clock, the abrasion was more prominent, which typically means that the projectile's going that way because it's abrading the skin more here as it travels. It went through her left lung twice, so it went through the lower lobe at the top of the lower lobe and at the top of the upper lobe. Then it crossed and went through her trachea, which is your windpipe, and a large artery that comes out of the aorta called the brachiocephalic artery. So it lacerated that, and then the projectile was here, right under the medial part of the right collarbone. So it went from back to front and left to right and upward if she's standing straight up and down. And there was about 700 milliliters of primarily clotted blood in the chest cavity.
Would either of these wounds been fatal on their own?
Either could have been on their own, yes.
The gunshot wound to the head, would you have expected that to be immediately fatal?
Probably not. The brain would respond to something like that by swelling up, which could eventually be fatal. The injury in and of itself, just the laceration, probably not immediately.
And what about the gunshot wound to the back and torso?
Also not immediately. The lungs have a lot of arteries in them and veins and vascularity, but the fact that she bled so much into the chest cavity and so much of it clotted meant that her heart had to still be beating for that to take place, for the blood to continue to clot as it was coming out, so not immediately fatal.
During your external examination, did you see any other abrasions or anything else on Ms. Robinson's body?
She had a few very small abrasion on the anterior and lateral left arm. She had a 1 3/4 by 1 inch scrape abrasion in her left armpit, axilla or armpit. She had a 2 by 1/4 inch scrape abrasion just above the left elbow, and she had a 1/4 inch patchy abrasion on the top of her left foot near the ankle, near the outer ankle.
Would those abrasions be consistent with somebody falling to the ground?
Yes.
Did she have any punctuate injuries on her body?
Well, the punctate abrasions are just pinpoint abrasions, those were out here on the arm.
Would that be consistent with somebody falling onto concrete or something that may have loose pebbles, gravel on it?
Sure, yes. Yes.
Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a disc of some autopsy photos that I was shown right before I came in to testify.
Did you recognize those photos when you saw them?
Yes,
And they're photos that were taken during Ms. Robinson's autopsy?
yes.
At this time, the state moves State's Exhibit F into evidence as State's Exhibit 6.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit F for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 6.
And published, Your Honor?
You may. You may. And ladies and gentlemen, I've ordered the display to be kept in a particular orientation for a reason. If you're unable to see where you're sitting, you're welcome to kind of move around and get closer if you need to.
Can you make a step down?
She may.
You don't introduce all this document that's in here, explain to the jury what it is in these photos here. This first story, yeah.
This is the left side of the Dimitri's face. There's a lump here. You can start to appreciate that's a little laceration of her face.
Were you able to see the bump that you were talking about? This right here? The third photo.
This is the gunshot wound, the ultra one here that I already talked about. You can see the patchy abrasion around it. And more abrasion here. And then that's a little laceration here.
Fourth photograph?
This is the one on the outside of her back. She's lying down on her side.
And the fifth photograph.
And that's the close-up views. If you turn her facing up, this would be the vehicle position. That was the abrasion that I was talking about. That's more common there. And that was all up through the lungs and then through the end.
Dr. Levesi, you had discussed a lack of gunpowder soot or stippling in conjunction with the injury to the head over the left ear. Was there any indication of gunpowder soot or stippling on the back?
No,
The remainder of your internal examination, would you classify that as unremarkable from a pathological perspective?
yes, fairly, yes,
You mentioned also performing toxicology.
yes,
Was toxicology performed in this case?
it was.
Was there any alcohol in Ms. Robinson's system?
No,
Did the pathology or the toxicology give any indication whether there were drugs or controlled substances in her system?
there were not.
Did you remove the projectiles that you discussed seeing in the x-ray?
Yes,
I want to go ahead, Dr. Levesi, first show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit G. This larger envelope is open, so you can go in
Okay.
there. There should be a smaller envelope inside.
okay.
Do you recognize that item?
I do.
What is it?
This is the envelope that I put the projectile from the right neck, I said, right here.
And how do you recognize that item as being that projectile?
It's labeled with her name and her case number and my initials and the date, and I've signed it across the evidence tape in the back.
Does that item appear to be in the same or substantially similar condition to when you packaged it?
Yes.
This time the state will move State's Exhibit G into evidence as State's Exhibit 7.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
State's Exhibit G for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 7.
Dr. Lopez, you can take a look at State's Exhibit H, that envelope is also good evidence. You recognize that smaller envelope contained inside?
I do.
What is it?
This is the projectile from the left scalp that I removed from here.
How do you recognize it as being that?
It has her name, identification number, the date. It says projectile from left scalp. It has my initials and my signature across the evidence tape.
Does that item appear to be in the same condition as when you corrected the package?
It does.
This time the state moves State's Exhibit H into evidence as State's Exhibit 8.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
No objection.
State's Exhibit H for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 8.
Dr. Levesi, do you have an opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause of death of Benitria Robinson?
Yes.
And what is that?
She died of 2 gunshot wounds of the head and back.
And do you have an opinion as to the manner of death of Benitria Robinson?
Yes.
And what is that?
Homicide.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Gorley, cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Dr. Levesi, I heard you testify that you believe the bullet traveled diagonally. I'm speaking about the bullet from the head,
Okay.
the head wound, that it traveled diagonally towards the front of the face, downward and towards the front, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you're basing that upon where the bullet ultimately ended up, correct?
Partially, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is there any chance of any ricocheting that would cause that trajectory in any way to change?
There's certainly a chance that the projectile struck something before it struck her, and then took that path, yes.
But in regards to once it entered the body, did it ricochet off any bones or anything that would have altered its course in any way whatsoever?
It doesn't really appear to have varied from its course once it struck her.
Okay. And in regards to the bullet wound from the back, I believe you testified that it went from the back to the front, left to right, and upwards.
Yes,
Okay, is that accurate?
yes.
Okay. And in that regard, along the similar way, is there any potential, once the bullet entered the body, in regards to trajectory, that a bone, a rib, or something may have changed the course of that bullet once it entered the body?
Yes, it could have. Hers is pretty straightforward because of that abrasion, and it does keep going in that direction, but it does fracture a rib in the back, and it fractures a rib up here, so sure.
Okay, so that part of things, it potentially could have changed from where it ultimately ended up,
Correct.
from a ricochet from a bone, a rib, or something like that?
Sure.
Okay. Now, you also testified that you located some abrasions on Ms. Robinson, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, are those abrasions consistent in the areas that they were found with somebody suffering those type of injuries from a gunshot?
well, the abrasions are not related to the gunshot wounds.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Would you expect to find those type of abrasions on somebody falling down from the area that those wounds came from? Are they in a place or part of her body that's consistent with being shot from the direction that she was and falling in the direction that she did?
Well, people don't reliably stand still when they're shot or fall in any particular direction, so they're consistent with her falling.
Okay. But you can't say as to what direction she fell after she was shot?
Well, they're all on the left side of her, so,
All right. Thank you.
sure.
Ms. Hawthorne,
No questions.
No additional questions, Judge.
any redirect?
Just pretty quick.
All right.
Are any of the abrasions consistent with her being mad?
Not particularly, no.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
No, sir.
The witness excused. All right, Dr. Levesi, you can go about your business. Thank you. Call your next witness.
State
state calls Joshua Freed.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the
I
record?
am Detective Joshua Freed. His last name is spelled F-R-I-E-D.
And you're in uniform.
I am.
You work for which agency?
The Ocala Police Department.
And how long have you worked in total for the Ocala Police Department?
A little over 10 years.
In your current position, you are a detective?
I'm a major crimes detective
Okay. How long have you held that position?
since June of this year.
June of 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
And what type of crimes do you investigate as a major crimes detective?
Homicide, sexual battery, child abuse, aggravated batteries, a lot of the major offenses, most felony offenses.
Prior to June of this year and becoming a major crimes detective, what was your position with the Ocala Police Department?
I was assigned to the patrol division. I worked nights.
Okay. And how long did you have that position for?
Off and on, that was pretty much a bulk of my experience. I've been on a few violent crime task force in between then.
Okay. What was your position specifically in September of 2005?
I was on the
15, sorry.
I was on the directed patrol team, which is one of the task force I was referring to.
Okay. Were you on the same directed patrol team as Officer Rodriguez?
I was.
Okay. Were you part of the traffic stop that the jury has already heard about that early morning of September 13th of 2015?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Okay. And were you in your own vehicle? Were you with somebody? Can you describe to the jury like how you were at that traffic stop?
Typically, on the task force, we don't use marked patrol cars. We none use an Ultima and some unmarked Crown Vics. The team typically consists of 4 people and a supervisor.
Okay.
It's mixed. I'm usually partnered up with David Rodriguez. He was my partner on the task force, but you know, the situations where he's not there that day or he's sick, we kind of jump in the same car. I think that night one of our members was sick. So I was in the vehicle that stopped and initiated the traffic stop.
Okay. Was any other law enforcement officer in the vehicle that you were in?
I believe David Rodriguez. I know on scene it was Officer Hall and Sergeant Green.
Okay. At a certain point in time while this traffic stop is occurring, did something else catch your attention?
During the traffic stop, yes, ma'am.
What was that?
Shots being fired south of our location.
Okay. What did you immediately do upon hearing those shots?
I called the shots in over dispatch, retrieved an assault rifle, and then started running to the scene.
You started running.
Yeah, towards where the shots were being fired.
Okay. How did you approach that particular scene?
To kind of explain things, I don't know if you have a diagram, but
I
we
do.
were on. Oh, do you?
For the officer?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there an indication on this diagram where the traffic stop was?
Yes, this is Southwest 19th Street. We stopped approximately right here. I'm sorry. Southwest 19th Street, we had the car stopped approximately right here, and it was facing east. The car facing east, I was on the north side of the car, looking in the drive towards this parking lot. And pretty much this area.
Is this blue built with blue on it, is that what's commonly referred to as the Oyster Bar?
Yeah, he's called Moses Oyster.
And then the Cloud9 Club is right next to it. Okay. So you get your rifle and
Which
you,
is in the car behind the truck stop.
and then you start running where?
The rifle, I run to this intersection because there's somebody down here. So I grab the rifle, run up here, turn around and look at Sergeant Green, car to make sure she's okay, she can't leave because we have citizens in the vehicle that are responsible. So I'm now standing at this intersection.
Okay. So you said you saw somebody
There's a,
at that location.
There's a female that's on the ground.
So what do you do upon seeing this female on the ground in this location and looking back at your sergeant?
Making sure she's okay, start talking to the female on the ground, trying to find where she's been injured. direction, because there are people there with her. You know, kind of using direct pressure on the wound where she hit at it. It's like, because you have to assess. So I'm assessing the injuries, and from there I'm keeping an eye on the scene in front of me.
Do you see any other law enforcement in this area when you're at this corner?
Yeah, I can see law enforcement here from these detectives, I think, also.
Okay. You see him approaching his vehicle?
Yeah, I don't know if it's in person view. I can look down this intersection and see him interacting with one another.
Do you leave this corner?
I do.
Where do you go next?
I run straight.
Okay. And he is where?
He is pretty much right there in the area of the entrance on the side.
Okay. What do you do once you get to the location where there's people, including officers?
Start breaking up the crowd. My intention there is to meet with a person on the ground who's representing the view. A lot of times what we see is people interact or they try to help it. So I'm trying to clear the crowd back, make it safe for you and your aid. Interrupt or grab if they're.
After that, where do you go next?
I remain here with him, and I can see the entrance to Cloud 9. I am then, of course, picked to go into this establishment to determine if there's more injured people. There's also a subject laying on the ground in the entrance on the back.
Okay. Prior to entering the club, you've seen an injured person on this corner,
Yes,
correct?
West
Okay.
Hopkins office.
Injured person that's being attended to in this location.
He's actually been received.
Okay. And then you, upon getting to the doorway of Cloud 9, you see a third injured person.
Yes, I could actually see him from where we were standing, but I couldn't leave that intersection. But yeah, when we go to make entry, he's right here.
What's the purpose of that time for you to enter inside the club?
To make sure there's no threats or other victims inside the club, which we make entry after we do 4 or 5 hours. But that was my objective at that time. It was kind of putting better for me.
Okay, now, do you eventually go to another location in the property area?
From here, I exit, the building is clear. I position myself back where I'm in the car, and I'm summoned to assist with the location of that police court. Walk the city in our officer to see if we can locate the case.
And lastly, before I have you return to the stand, what location did you go through to look for any possible evidence?
We started with this South Park one in its entirety, and then at some point, we did go in strike lines, which you want to see. Because as we're running, we get here. Well, I'm running as it's going out of the streets.
So you went, covered the parking lot on the side.
And the front of the building. This whole property started with this one.
Thank you.
Other than the female on the corner, the female being given CPR by Officer Tuck in the front, and the gentleman in the doorway, did you see yourself any other people that appeared to be injured by a gunshot wound?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
What is a grid search?
It's a pattern search. We use different searches, but a grid search is a pattern search that we conduct in the parking lot. So you try to, it's kind of effective at locating evidence. We want to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Okay. Can you describe to the jury how you conducted a grid search of the parking lot that early morning?
Well, that instance, we separated the parking lot. So me and Officer Howe, we were going pretty much, I'm trying to get a word for it, side by side, kind of in a grid formation. We just break it up into sections. So you pretty much walk side to side, get to one end, turn, walk side to side the other way, and then it's pretty much it. It's pretty much like an organized, detailed search, walking in some type of formation.
Okay. And did you use any sort of lighting that you had on
Yes,
you
ma'am.
to help you locate anything?
I did.
What did you use?
I have actually, they had given us these brand new high-powered flashlights
Okay.
that are really bright.
In the parking lot on the side of the club, did you locate anything that could have possibly been evidence in this case?
If I recall, we located a large amount of casings.
Okay. What did you do when you saw those things?
With the casings, because of course I'm not equipped with evidence markers, which are hard plastic markers that have either letters or numbers on them. We carry these notepads for field notes. I broke off the field notes, crimped them in the middle, kind of like this, and put them over anything that we located.
Okay.
Not next to, but over, so nobody steps on it. Not that there was a lot of people moving, but
Were there still cars in that parking lot?
there were a few. I don't recall how many, but yeah.
Were there non-law enforcement people in the parking lot when you were doing that?
I don't recall. I don't believe so. I think at that point the crime scene was established, so no, there wouldn't be.
Okay. Was that the only location that you found shell casings?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions.
Cross-examination,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Morgan.
Officer Freed, initially, when you conducted the traffic stop, the occupants of the vehicle, you heard gunshots, correct?
While standing outside, yes.
Okay. And at the time, other than knowing the gunshots were from the south, you didn't know where they were coming from, correct?
Not exactly, no. We
Okay.
had an idea that they were coming from.
And is it fair to say that you were also concerned, or your other officers were concerned with the safety of the occupants of the vehicle, correct?
Well, yes, sir.
Okay. And in fact, you left an officer there for their safety, correct?
Yes, sir, we did.
Now, when you ran to the scene, would you agree with me that there were several hundred people in the vicinity around there?
To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you the exact number. There was a large amount, kind of target locked on the person down at that point.
Okay.
But from where I was standing looking south, yes, there was a large amount of people.
Okay. And that large amount of people were scattered throughout the area of the nightclub, correct?
From my field of vision, I don't know about behind the building and between the
Right.
buildings, but yes.
In the road, south of the building, north of the building, around the bodies, screaming, hysteria, kind of a chaotic situation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in regards to you recovering or seeing the casings in that area, is it fair to say that some of the casings had been in a crack or in cracks or divisions of the sidewalk?
I don't recall where
You
they
don't
were lying.
recall?
I just know they were, most of them were in that period of the parking lot.
Okay. And in light of all the people that were surrounding that area and in that general vicinity, would it be a fair statement to say that potentially those casings, which are lightweight, could have been kicked, could have been moved, could have been stepped on, could have been changed from their original position?
That's a fair statement, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hawthorne?
No questions.
Mr. Bankowitz?
Thank you, Judge. Overall, officer, what was the lighting there in front of the club?
Well, we had the street lights, and then the parking lot itself was dimly lit.
Dimly lit?
At that time, yes, sir.
And the area, I think you said you had to use your high-powered flashlights in the parking lot area to find the.
Well, I mean, I'm issued a high-power flashlight. I don't have any other, but yeah.
Okay, you needed to use that to find.
I needed a flashlight because, yeah, I'm looking for a shell casing, so I don't want to step on any.
And in the parking lot, other than the street lights, what is the lighting like?
That's yeah, the front of the club's lit because it's neon, but the parking lot portion it was dimly lit, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody? Is the officer excused? All right, you can go about your business. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Call your next witness.
State calls Carol Ballas.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat there. Ms. Kipling.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Carol Ballas, B-A-L-L-A-S.
And how are you employed?
I'm a crime scene technician with the City of Ocala Police Department.
How long have you been with OPD?
10 years.
And you said you're a crime scene technician. What does that mean?
Crime scene technician in the City of Ocala, we're responsible for documenting crime scenes and identifying and collecting evidence, and then sometimes processing that evidence.
Okay. And do you receive any special or specific training to do your job?
Yes, well, there was a lot of on-the-job training. I also have attended certification classes for homicide investigations, sexual assault, sexual homicides, fatal fire investigations, forensic entomology. So those are all certification classes that I've completed.
Were you on duty the early morning hours of September 13th of 2015?
Yes,
And were you dispatched as a crime scene technician to the Cloud 9 Club?
yes.
And can you describe to the jury what you saw going on when you arrived?
Okay, the scene was very chaotic. There were a lot of people there, club goers. We had quite a few officers already on scene. When I first arrived, there was an officer doing CPR on one victim for both scene safety and trying to provide care for the victims. I said there's many officers there. We're trying to locate and identify who the victims were. I was primarily taking photographs at the time, because sometimes when you get those photographs right at the beginning, there are things that aren't evident once everyone has cleared out.
So is that the initial thing that you do upon arriving on scene, start taking photos?
Yes.
What directs you where and to what you're taking photographs of?
Sometimes the detective or officers will point out things. Sometimes it's just my own observation. And in this case, like as I said, the scene was very chaotic, so I began trying to locate victims based on what people on the scene were saying, what we were hearing over the radio from dispatch.
Did you take photographs of Ms. Robinson, who Officer Tuck was performing CPR on
Yes,
in
I
the
did.
front of the club?
Yes, I did.
Did you also locate multiple other people that appeared to have been shot?
Yes.
And did you photograph them as well?
Yes.
The record showing defense, what's marked for identification is states I, and composite exhibit states J 1 through 5.
Alice, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification first is states I. Do you recognize this CD?
I do.
And what does it contain?
This contains all of the photographs that I took at that scene.
All of the photographs or some of the photographs?
Photographs that I took.
Okay. And did you review the photographs that are on this particular CD?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
My name and the date that I reviewed them, I signed it.
Okay. Is this CD contain photographs that are fair and accurate representations of things that you saw upon arriving at the Cloud 9 scene the early morning hours of September 13th of 2015?
Yes.
Now showing you composite exhibit J 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Back in order. Can you review these 5, please? Do you recognize those 5 photos?
I do.
Are those printouts of the 5 photos that are contained on this CD?
Yes.
And these are also, like the CD, fair and accurate representation of 5 photographs you took at that scene that morning.
Yes.
At this time, the state would move states I in as states 9 and composite exhibit J as 10 A through E.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
No objection.
All right. States Exhibit I for identification will be received in evidence as States Exhibit 9. States Composite Exhibit J will be received in evidence as States Exhibits 10A, B, C, D, and E. Council approach. You may publish.
Along the 1900 block of South Pine, I don't recall specifically what business it was in front of.
This person was not in front of the club.
No.
Do you recall where this person was located?
Also in the same general area of the 1900 block of South Pine, but not,
The individual in the first picture we looked at?
right, within, you know, the yards, 100 yards, 50 yards.
Is this a photograph of that same individual we just saw?
Yes.
In the previous
Yes.
photograph? Where was this individual?
In the doorway of Cloud9.
And is that same individual?
Yes, it is.
Was taking photographs all of your crime scene tech duties at this particular location?
Yes, I then, crime scene technicians from the sheriff's department arrived and I turned the scene over.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, sir. Ms. Payless, how long was it before you got to the crime scene from the time that it happened? Do you know?
Within minutes.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge as to whether the people that you took photographs of prior to your arrival had been moved?
I do not.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge as to how they got into the positions that they were when you took the photos?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hawthorne?
Were you only instructed to take photographs of people, injured persons?
No.
Did you also take photographs of physical items, like casings?
I took multiple pictures at the scene. Whether or not there were casings in them, I don't recall at this moment.
Did you take any photographs of cars that were parked in the parking lot?
I took scene photographs. I'm sure there were vehicles in those photographs, yes.
When you arrived, did you put up the crime scene tape, or was that tape up, or?
Some of it was already up. More was put up after I arrived because I brought more with me.
Okay. And the lighting out there, I noticed that you probably were using a flash on your camera.
Yes.
Lighting was poor, dim, dark?
Out in the street, it was brighter because you have the ambient light from street lights and emergency vehicles. The shots that were taken inside the doorway of the club, it was dimmer in there because you didn't have that additional lighting.
Did you get any photographs of the south side of the club?
I don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
No additional questions, Judge.
Any redirect?
Ms. Ballas, would you say the focus of your photographs was to document people that were injured?
Yes.
Do you recall ever there being any markers, evidence markers set up that you took photographs of?
That would have been because it was not inside. It wasn't inside the city limits, and we were called to assist prior to the sheriff's department getting there. The evidence identification would have been under their purview, so my task was to initially get there and document the scene as it was at the time I got there.
No further questions.
Anything else?
No redirect, Your
No,
Honor.
sir.
Ms. Ballas, you were talking about jurisdiction.
Yes.
Can you tell us where the city jurisdiction ended in regards to the line that you didn't cross?
It's not that I didn't cross the line, because this, city limits aren't perfectly square. We have areas that, ingress and egress out, that's the same, regarding any northwest, south, and east. Because Cloud9 is in such close proximity to the Ocala Police Department, to provide scene security, to try and identify victims and get them help rapidly, Ocala Police will respond. As I said, that little area, or the area where Cloud9 is actually part of the county. So I knew that the county would be coming to so-called work the crime scene. I knew that I wouldn't be working it. So does that answer your question?
Did you walk the north side of the building to see if there was any evidence?
I walked all around the building, but it was more to, at that time, identify victims, help EMS identify victims to come in and direct them into where the victims were.
And how long were you on scene?
Probably an hour.
Thank you.
Anything else? Is the witness excused? All right, ma'am, you can go about your business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness.
Sue Lavodi?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Absolutely. Mr. McCourt?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name for the court reporter?
Susan Livoti, Livoti. I'm with the Marion County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your position with the sheriff's office?
Crime scene technician.
How long have you been a crime scene technician?
About 10 years.
Prior to that, did you hold any other positions with the Marion County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, I've worked in the property room and as the spokesperson.
In total, how long have you been with the sheriff's office?
19 years.
Can you tell the jury what you do day to day as a crime scene technician?
When we get called to a scene, our general duties are to assess the situation, take photographs, take notes, collect any evidence, work with the deputies and the detectives to go through the scene, and then we return back to the office and we'll package everything and write reports.
On September 13, 2015, did you have occasion to go to the Cloud 9 nightclub?
Yes, I did.
Is that located within Marion County?
Yes, it is.
Do you recall what time you arrived at the scene?
I believe it was around 2 a.m.
Can you describe for the jury what it is you observed upon arriving?
When I got there, there were multiple personnel and vehicles from Ocala Police Department and the Sheriff's Office. There were officers walking around, interviewing people, looking at the scene. There was a crowd of people across the street along the sidewalk.
And can you tell the jury what steps you follow when you arrive at a crime scene in order to document it and collect evidence?
On that night, the first thing I did was speak with the Ocala Police Department crime scene tech, who gave me some information that she had. I then checked with the scene supervisor, which was the sergeant who called me there. She gave me some more information, and then as I waited for the detective to arrive, I walked around to assess the situation and see what was there and make my plan of what I would need to collect and what equipment I would need.
Do you take photographs of the area when you arrive?
Yes,
When you take photographs, do you ever use what are called easels?
yes.
Can you tell the jury what an easel is and why you use it?
When there are multiple items, or there's items that show a point of direction, we'll use numbered easels. It's a tent-like item, it's plastic, and it has a large number on it, and we'll put one easel at each item, and we'll also use small arrows if the item is small, and we'll place those at that item and use however many we need, and then we'll take individual pictures of each one.
Did you have occasion to look in the parking lot immediately south of the Cloud 9 nightclub?
Yes,
Did you see anything there that you felt warranted being photographed?
yes.
What was that?
When I first got there, there was a small easel with the letter C on it. That was from Ocala Police Department, and that was towards the edge of the parking lot. And as I was working and getting myself situated, some of the officers from Ocala Police Department searched the parking lot and found some items and marked them with pieces of paper, which I then went back and put down easels.
The record reflect, I'm sure defense counsel would have marked as states exhibit KL and states composite exhibit M 1 through 68.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a reasonable time for you to take a mid-afternoon break, and that'll save you watching what's going on right now. This will be about 10 or 15 minutes. Please leave your pads on your chairs, and we'll be back with you shortly. Jerry's out of the courtroom. I'll be in recess for approximately 10 minutes.
May I go ahead and show these to,
Absolutely. I just didn't want to take the chance on that times 3, so. Especially since I still plan to recess around 4 o'clock, so this was a good time. Mr. McCourt, you may proceed.
first I'd like to go ahead and show you what's marked as State's Exhibit K. Can you take a look at that for me?
Okay.
You recognize it?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a copy of a PowerPoint that you put together for today.
And what is contained in that PowerPoint presentation?
Copies of photographs I took at the scene.
Does that PowerPoint presentation contain photos that fairly and accurately reflect the photos you took at the scene?
Yes.
Taking a look at State's Exhibit L, can you identify that for me?
That is a copy of the photos that I took.
Are those photos all, the photos that you took, are they contained on that DVD?
Yes.
And as they appear on that DVD, they accurately reflect the photos that you took on September 13, 2015?
Yes.
Now, during the recess, you had a chance to look through State's Exhibit M, photographs 1 through 68. You had a
Yes.
chance to look at them.
Yes.
Are those photos that were taken that night at the Cloud9 nightclub?
Yes.
Do those also appear on the CD and in the PowerPoint presentation you have in front of you?
Yes, they do.
And do these printed photos fairly and accurately depict the photos that you took that night and how the scene appeared?
Yes.
At this time around, the state removed State's Exhibit K into evidence as State's Exhibit 11.
Any objection?
No objection.
No, sir.
All right, State's Exhibit K for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 11.
This time, the state removed State's Exhibit L into evidence as State's Exhibit 12.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
State's Exhibit L for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 12.
The state removed State's Composite Exhibit M, photographs 1 through 68, into evidence as State's Exhibit 13A through EPP.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
All right. State's Composite Exhibit M will be received in evidence as State's Composite Exhibit 13.
And may the state publish Exhibit 11 to the jury?
Yes, sir.
As I go through, I'm probably going to ask you questions about these areas because they explain to the jury what it is that we're
Okay.
starting with the first photograph, can you tell the jury what's depicted?
That's the front of the building, Cloud9.
And the second photograph?
Still the front of the building, but from the corner.
The third photograph?
The front of the building, close-up of a bloodied item on the ground.
Fourth photograph?
The front of the building at the entry is just showing how it wound up after the incident.
Fifth photograph?
That's the south side of the building. Close-up of the vehicle parked next to the building on the south side. The parking lot on the south side. The same south side. That's from the back end of the parking lot looking towards 441. Basically the same area, just a different angle. The back of the building. Another
photo of the back of the building. The same rear. That's towards the front of the parking lot where one of the shell casings was discovered.
Let me ask you a little bit about this. The easels that you use lettered or numbered easels?
Numbered,
Does the city of Ocala use lettered or numbered easels?
letter.
Is that how that area of the parking lot appeared when you first got there?
Yes,
Did you later replace any easels or markers they had down with your own?
yes, I did. That's the parking lot. It's after the OPD officers located some shell casings, and they put down pieces of paper to mark the location for me.
16 photograph?
That's the parking lot with the numbered easels that I put down.
And I'd like you to, I want to show you State's Exhibit B, if I could have, or sorry, Exhibit 2, if I could have you step down.
Sure.
Come on over here just to make sure all number of jurors. Can you point to that, to the area on this photograph that's going to be depicted in the photograph in the PowerPoint presentation?
This photo is approximately this area right here.
Point to the area of the photographs of the diagonal.
The diagonal was facing south from the building.
Go ahead, please. Show you the next photograph.
That's at the edge of the parking lot. Another view of the parking lot with my numbered easels on them.
Now, is this closer to 441 or further away from 441 than the other photos?
Closer. The same shot, just a different angle.
Now, do you, after kind of taking overall photographs, do you then photograph each individual easel?
Yes, I do. So that's easel number 9, which is at the end of the parking lot, closer to 441. 9 marks the number for that shell casing I found, and the yellow arrow is to identify the exact spot. A close-up of easel 9. Then it's stepping back, showing the whole parking lot with all the numbered easels.
And where is easel 9 located? If you identify that for the jury.
At the very end of the parking lot that was marked, there's a curved section with semi-horizontal lines, and number 9 is basically in the middle of that. That's number 10, which was the closest spot to 441, and it was just outside the marked lines. A close-up of number 10. Again, the back out of the whole parking lot. Number 11, that was a few feet south of number 10. 9, 10, and 11 were sort of clustered together at the end of the parking lot. A close-up of 11.
Does this photograph here, the 28th photograph, show how easels, or the casings of easels 9, 10, and 11 are?
Yes. It's easels 9, 10, and 11 from the opposite side of the parking lot where I'm standing originally.
Can you see where 441 is located in this photograph?
It would be behind me. Oh, wait. Am I standing? No, it would be in front of me because I was more south towards the corner of the parking lot. That's the parking lot. I'm moving closer to easel numbers 1 through 8. The cluster of easels number 1 through 5, basically the middle of the parking lot.
Now, in this photograph, you've got, looks like easels 1 through 5, kind of in the middle of the photo. Are there any easels depicted at the bottom?
Yes, number 6.
And what about in the background?
In the background would be number 7 and 8.
Now, at each easel, there's a little yellow thing, looks like a flat piece of plastic on the ground. Tell the jury what that is.
Those are the yellow arrows that I use to designate what item is at that easel. It gives you a point of reference in the photograph.
Now, if you're doing close-ups at a particular easel, do you sometimes move the easel closer to the arrows to capture it in the photographs?
Yes, I do.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Do the arrows themselves, though, remain stationary?
Correct.
Let's go ahead and go through these.
Easel number 1. A close-up of easel 1. Back out showing the whole section. Easel number 2 with 2 arrows. Close-up of easel 2 with 1 arrow. Close-up of number 2 with the other arrow. Back out showing the whole cluster of easels. Easel number 3. And a close-up of easel 3. Another photograph of easel 3 just from a different angle. The photo showing the cluster of easels 1 through 5. Easel 4 with 3 arrows. One of the arrows at easel 4. Another picture of easel 4 with the 3 arrows. The second arrow at number 4. Again, the photo of 4 with the 3, and then another close-up of the last arrow at number 4. And then number 4 again. The cluster of easels 1 through 5. Easel 5 with 3 arrows. A close-up of the first arrow closest to the easel number 5. Another view of that picture. And then back out showing the cluster of easels 1 through 5. Close-up from a different angle of easels 1 through 5, and now you can see easel number 6. That's easel 6 with an arrow. And a close-up of easel 6. Another close-up of easel 6. Back out showing the cluster of 1 through 5. Easels 7 and 8. 7 and 8 from a different angle. A close-up of 7. Another close-up of 7. Another close-up of 7. And another close-up of 7. Easel 8 with 2 arrows. Close-up of the first arrow. Another close-up of that same. And easel 8 with the second arrow. And a close-up of that arrow. And then back out showing the position of 7 and 8. And then the overall cluster of basically 1 through 8. And then further back out showing the whole parking lot. And then another angle showing the whole parking lot with all of the easels.
State's Exhibits N and O.
You first take a look at what's been marked as State's Exhibit N. Take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it.
I do.
What do you recognize it as being?
This is the envelope where I packaged some of the shell casings I located in the parking lot.
And what easels were those shell casings collected from?
Easels 1 through 5.
And that on the photographs, was that grouping of easels kind of in the center?
Yes.
A lot of the photos? And how do you recognize that item as containing the shell casings you collected from easels 1 through 5?
That's my handwriting and my signature on the back.
After an item like that is collected, is it common for other people to open the item for fingerprints, DNA, evidence viewing, firearms examination, and the like?
Yes.
Does the packaging of that item indicate to you that it has been opened for those purposes?
Yes, it was.
Other than those things, does that item appear to be in the same or substantially similar condition to when you placed it into evidence?
Yes.
This time the state removed State's Exhibit N into evidence as State's Exhibit 14.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
State's Exhibit N for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 14.
Go ahead. Open up State's Exhibit 14.
Want to take it out?
Taking a look at these sub-packages here, are you able to determine which of these came from, when you placed these in the evidence, did you mark which easel each of them came from?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And
Did you package shell casings from easel 1
Yes,
in
I
one
did.
particular package?
Yes, that would be this one. And it's marked easel 1.
Now, is there something on there indicating Exhibit 60A?
Yes.
now, is that entire exhibit, the entire package given a number by the sheriff's office when it's placed into evidence?
Yes, it is.
Are things within there then given the sub-heading like A, B, C?
Yes.
So easel A contains or easel 1 is contained in 60A.
Correct.
How is the packaging identifying
Containing the shell casings from easel 2?
The same, my handwriting marking it as easel 2, and it would be item 60B.
And easel 3?
The same, marked easel 3 with my handwriting, and also 60C.
And easel 4?
The same with my handwriting, and number 60D.
And easel 5?
Same with my handwriting, and 60E.
I'll go ahead and package these up. Could you take a look at what's been marked as State's Exhibit, I believe it's O? Okay. You recognize that item?
Yes.
And what do you recognize as being?
This is the other envelope full of shell casings that I collected at the scene.
And how do you recognize it as being those shell casings?
My handwriting on the front and my signature on the seal on the back.
And does that item appear to be in the same or substantially similar condition when you place it into evidence?
Yes.
This time the state will move State's Exhibit O into evidence as State's Exhibit 15.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
State's Exhibit O for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 15.
Similar to the last exhibit, did you, when these items were placed into this item of evidence, did you mark each of those individually indicating what easel they were taken from?
Yes.
Can you go ahead and open up State's Exhibit 15 for me? That item was placed in evidence at the sheriff's office. It was given item number 61, is that correct?
Yes.
And how were each of the smaller bags within that item marked for identification?
The item from easel 6 is 61A. From easel 7 is 61B. Easel 8 is 61C. Easel 9 is 61D. Easel 10, 61E, and easel 11, 61F.
Did you have a particular reason for choosing why to package these of easels 6 through 11 together and 1 through 5 together?
They're all the ones in this package are all the same make. The ones in the other package are all the same make.
When you arrived on the scene, was the young lady who was deceased still present?
Yes.
May the record reflect I'm showing the United States Exhibit P. And let's remark that States Exhibit P. Can you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It is the Florida driver's license for the victim in the case.
Is that Benitria Robinson?
Yes, it is.
Did you collect that item?
Yes, I did.
Did you place it into evidence?
Yes, I did.
Does that item appear to be in the same condition as when you placed it into evidence?
Yes, it is.
This time the state will move States Exhibit P into evidence as States Exhibit 6.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
State's Exhibit P for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 16.
Where was that item located relative to Ms. Robinson?
If I remember correctly, it was in her purse.
Was her purse near her body?
Yes, it was.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Lavati, the numbers that were assigned to the casings, they don't have any significance other than for identification purposes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. For instance, 15 could be 1, it could be 7 or 8. It just depends upon when they are discovered and what easel you put next to them, correct?
Correct.
Okay. They don't have any relation as to whether 1 is the first shot that was fired or 15 is the last shot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, several of your photos I observed, they were very dark. Did that accurately depict the lighting in the parking lot?
Yes,
That you
it
observed?
does.
Okay. And by the time that you got there, had the crowd dispersed?
From the inside the club, yes.
Okay. There were a lot of people around the crime scene or not?
On the opposite side of the street.
Okay. Now, I noticed that from your photos, there weren't any cars in the parking lot where the casings were recovered, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You have any knowledge as to whether there were cars there previously?
I do not know.
Okay. And obviously in the photos, there weren't any people in that area either.
Correct.
Do you have any knowledge as to whether there were people in that area?
No, I don't.
All right, okay. Where is your composite with the photos?
Officer Capricia with the
Yes, sir.
Officer Labonte, I'm going to show you what's been marked as M5713, exhibit number 13, EEE. And it depicts a shell casing, correct?
Correct.
And I believe it's number 8 from the little 8 in the top left-hand corner.
Yes.
Okay. Does it appear that that shell casing has either been run over or squashed in some manner?
I can't really tell from the photo. I don't recall if it
Okay.
was.
All right. It doesn't look to you like it is smashed in any way in that photo?
There seems to be a mark on it.
Okay. But you don't have any recollection as to whether it was damaged or not?
No, I don't.
Okay. I'd like to show you what has been marked as exhibit number 13 PPP, composite M68, and ask you if you remember that casing.
That's at easel 11.
Okay. And does it appear that that casing is inside a crack or part of the road?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, in light of the fact that this was a nightclub and there was in business and there were several hundred people in that area, including cars, would you, in relation to those casings, expect them to be in the original position that they were in?
No, given that information, I would not.
Okay. And the same thing is true for what I showed you as, I believe, the photograph M57, and with the little number 8 next to it, that appeared to be damaged in some way, or a mark on it, at least according to you. And according to me, it appeared to be smashed. Would you have expected casings in that area if there were automobiles parked in there, in that vicinity, and automobiles leaving that club to have potentially damaged the casings and or moved the casings from their original position?
It's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hawthorne?
Your Honor, could I address, I have one question that I forgot to ask.
Certainly.
Thank you, Your Honor. As part of collecting the evidence, you indicated that you found, I believe, 21 casings,
Yes.
13 of which were a particular ammunition, I believe FC 9mm Luger, correct?
Correct.
And 8 of them were another type of ammunition, I believe Winchester or WIN 9mm Luger, correct?
Correct.
And you designated those casings as 1 through 5 for the FC and 6 through 11 for the Winchester, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hawthorne?
Good
afternoon.
Hello.
Does the Marion County Sheriff's Office and OPD have, or any of the other police departments that are within the Marion County jurisdiction, like Bellevue, Dunellen, do y'all have a coordinated team to react to a mass casualty like this?
No.
Shell casings that you located and identified, they're very light, aren't they?
Yes.
And so they can be easily moved by other objects, correct? They can be moved by people knocking into them, correct? They can be picked up by tire treads, actually, can't they?
It's possible.
Okay. They could have been damaged by some of those things, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The way that you marked off the parking lot area now, did you put the tape up in the area where
No.
you marked? Do you know who did?
It was done prior to my arrival.
Okay. The one picture that we saw with the paper cones, just the note paper there, was that a location that you addressed first?
As far as the whole processing,
Yes.
no. I believe that we took care of the decedent first.
Okay. Would you have gone around and done an overall videotape of the scene first? The area that you were going to be marking, just in its natural state as you found it when you got there?
We do sometimes.
Did you do it on this case?
No.
Okay. When you arrived, would it be fair to say that Ocala Police Department already had some markings out there?
Yes.
Some were paper and some were easels?
No, there were just a couple easels. The paper was afterwards as officers started searching further through the parking lot.
Okay, so some casings had been located and easels had been placed down, and then when the officers started doing their grid search, they used paper to mark the other locations? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay. And when you gathered the shell casings and marked them, did you mark them in a certain order for identification purposes? And I'm referring to what Mr. Gorley's last question was, in the sense that you found some that were of one type, Luger, and then you found others that were of Winchester brand.
That was done afterwards.
Okay,
When I-
so did you coordinate or find that all of the Winchesters were in one place and all the Lugers were in another place? Or were they mixed?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, I notice in the photographs, you have the easels and you have the yellow markers, but I didn't see any scale tape.
Correct.
What is scale tape?
It would be, depending on the size, it would basically be a ruler that you could put down next to an item.
And it would give you a perspective of the size of the item?
Yes.
Did you take measurements from any point, like the corner of the building, to each one of those easels?
No.
Did you make a scale drawing of the parking lot?
No,
When you collected the casings with the easels, some of the easels had more than one casing assigned to it.
correct.
Okay. Like one easel, I think, had like 3.
Yes,
When that was done, when you were collecting those shell casings, how did you differentiate each of those casings? Here's, I. Okay. It's easel 2,
yes,
and you have one yellow arrow,
yes,
and there are 2 shell casings, one on either side of the arrow.
yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I show this to the jury? I believe it's an echo. Sure. Okay. Just so they know what I'm talking about. Now, when you collected those casings, did you put any identifying marks on them to ensure that the casing on the right side of the arrow was designated so that you could recall which one was where?
No, I did not.
Isn't that sometimes done?
Yes,
Okay. But you didn't do that in this case?
no, I did not.
When you work with these items outside, do you wear protective clothing?
No,
Did you wear gloves?
yes.
And why is that?
It's general procedure.
Weren't you probably going to be asked to do some swabbings for DNA or maybe fingerprints later?
It's possible,
And you wouldn't want to contaminate the evidence, would you?
correct.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Nothing additional, Judge.
Any redirect? Is the witness excused? All right, you can step down and go about your business. Thank you. Call your next witness.
Rachel Peavy?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McCourt?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
Rachel Kenzie. My first name is spelled R-A-C-H-E-L. My last name is K-I-N-S-E-Y.
When I called you, I asked for Rachel Peavy. Did your name recently change?
Yes, sir.
How long ago?
A little over a week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Where do you work?
I work at the Marion County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been there for?
Almost 6 years.
Can you tell the jury what your job is with the Marion County Sheriff's Office?
My current job is I am the executive assistant to our staff attorney, Greg Gerald.
How long have you been in that position?
Just over a year.
Prior to that, what was your position with the Sheriff's Office?
A forensic crime scene technician as well as a forensic DNA technician.
How long did you hold that position for?
Almost 5 years.
And what kind of education did you have to prepare you for that position?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice with a specialization in forensic science from St. Leo University.
And as a forensic DNA technician and evidence technician, what were your day-to-day duties?
I was primarily a forensic crime scene technician. DNA was a little bit on the side, but as a crime scene technician, my job was to observe, document, and collect any items of possible evidentiary value from scenes, as well as perform any necessary testing that may have been requested.
If you were to process an item for latent fingerprints, how would you go about doing that?
To process an item for latent fingerprints, it would depend solely on the item itself. There are a lot of different processes that we can do based on the item, weather, texture, things like that.
What about a shell casing?
for a shell casing. In this case, I used a process which is a super glue. So I put the casings in a super glue, and then I would process them with black powder application. And I usually typically do that on the, I will say side of the shell casing, but not on the head stamp.
And can you process a shell casing for the presence of DNA?
You can, yes, sir.
How would you go about doing that?
To process a shell casing for suspected DNA, you just take a sterile hydrated swab and you hydrate that swab with deionized water, which is just a really fancy word for sterile water. And then I will swab the outside of the head stamp of the shell casing, typically where your fingers will be if you would load it into a magazine.
And do you do that before, if you were to process a shell casing for both DNA and latent fingerprints? Is there a particular order in which you would do that?
I would do DNA first. If I were to put that in the super glue, what we call it, chamber, it would mess any DNA up, so I always would do DNA first.
And with processing shell casings for latent fingerprints, after you put them in the super glue, how do you actually develop any latent fingerprints or possible latent fingerprints of value if they're present?
Once the items are in the super glue, if there are any oils or dirt, which is what is in a fingerprint, if there's anything that the super glue can adhere to, then by the application of black powder, I will be able to see if there's any type of ridge detail, if there's any type of information there for a fingerprint.
What do you do if you believe that there may be?
I will just remove that fingerprint with just clear plastic tape, and then I will put it on a fingerprint card to send to our latent examiner.
And does a latent examiner make the determination as to whether or not what may be a fingerprint is a fingerprint, and if it is, whether it's suitable for comparison?
Yes, sir.
And the DNA swabs that you collect from an area somebody may touch on a shell casing, do you do any further analysis of those?
I do not. Once I swab the item for DNA, I will place it into evidence, and then if it goes to FDLE, that is out of my call.
I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at what has been marked as State's Exhibit N and State's Exhibit O, and tell me if you recognize those items.
I do. I recognize these items based off of my then initials as well as my sheriff's office ID number.
And what do you recognize those items as being?
One package is 8 shell casings, Winchester 9mm Luger, and the other, there are 13 shell casings with FC 9mm Luger.
And the one with the 13 casings, is that the one marked as State's Exhibit 14?
Yes, sir.
And taking a look at the separate bags inside of these, do you recognize what's contained in there?
I do. These are the separate containers which had the casings, and again, my old initials as well as my sheriff's office ID number.
And if you could also take a look at what's been admitted into evidence in State's Exhibit 15, what's inside there, and tell me if you recognize what's inside.
They're separate packages which contain the shell casings, and again, my old initials with my sheriff's office ID number are on these.
Did you process those items for the presence of DNA and for latent fingerprints?
Yes, sir, I did.
I want to go ahead and first discuss the fingerprints.
Sure.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit U. Can you look at that and tell me if you recognize it?
Yes, sir. I recognize my handwriting on this latent fingerprint card, as well as my sheriff's office ID number and my old initials.
And what is that item that you're holding?
These are latent fingerprint cards that I took from the shell casings previously in these packages.
Does that item appear to be in the same or substantially similar condition when you place it into evidence?
Yes, sir.
This time the state would move State's Exhibit U into evidence and State's Exhibit 17.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
And Ms. Kinsey, on each of those cards, do you actually, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit U for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 17. Now you can go.
On each of those cards, Ms. Kinsey, will you mark which particular item within exhibits 14 and 15 you actually got the latent print from?
Yes, sir, I did.
May the record reflect I'm showing defense counsel what have been marked as states exhibit V, W, X, Y, and Z. I want to go ahead and show you what the marked as states exhibits V, W, X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
Starting with exhibit V. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, sir, I do.
What is it?
It is a suspected touch DNA swab from a shell casing.
Does it indicate what specific item that was taken from?
Yes, item 60A.
Which would have been a shell casing reflected as being collected from what easel?
Easel 1.
And going ahead to exhibit W.
There are 4 suspected touch DNA swabs from shell casings, item 60B, which were located at easel 2.
X, yes.
Okay. There are 2 suspected touch DNA swabs from shell casings, item 60C, which was easel 3. And this is Y, the state's
Yes.
Y. 3 suspected touch DNA swabs from shell casings, item 60D, which were at easel 4. And then
Exhibit Z.
Z. 3 suspected touch DNA swabs from shell casings, item 60E, which was located at easel 5.
And when you collect these, are you wearing any type of personal protective gear?
In this case, with in-house processing, I always change out my gloves. I wear gloves every time I process an item, and I change them out in between each item I process.
And what about your work area? How do you keep that area clean and free?
I clean my work area before I put sterile paper down, and I put sterile paper down on each item of evidence. So in between, I work each item of evidence that I work. Not only do I change my gloves, but I also change my paper as well.
In the area in which you work, can you describe that to the jury?
The area that I conducted this processing, it's the lab that we call for a crime scene. And in that area, we have a workbench. We also have tools and chemicals that are available to us so that we're able to perform that testing, but it's a very sterile environment.
Is access to it limited?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many people have access?
Crime scene technicians, DNA technicians, as well as supervisors in the crime scene unit.
Now, do the exhibits I've shown you, V, W, X, Y, and Z, appear to be in the same condition as when you created them?
Yes, sir.
At this time, the state moves states exhibits V, W, X, Y, and Z. The evidence is states exhibits 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
Ms. Hawthorne? Ms. Hawthorne?
Do we approach, please?
Yes, ma'am. All right, State's Exhibits V for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 18. State's Exhibit W for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 19. State's Exhibit X for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 20. State's Exhibit Y for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 21. And State's Exhibit Z for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 22.
I'm now showing the defense counsel states exhibits AA through FF. Kinsey, I'd like to go ahead and show you what's been marked as states exhibits. AA, BB, CC, BD, BB, and FF. Can you take a look at all of those and tell me if you recognize them?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, what do you recognize them as being? Starting with
A touch swab from the shell casing, item 61A.
And BB?
A touch swab from, there are 2 touch swabs from shell casings, item 61B. There are 2 touch swabs from 2 shell casings, item 61C. Suspected touch DNA swab from a shell casing, item 61D. A suspected touch swab from shell casing, item 61E. And a suspected touch swab from shell casing, item 61F.
Are those all touch swabs that you yourself took from those items?
Yes, sir, they are.
And do the items correspond to easels 6 through 11?
Do you mind if I look at my report just for specifics? Yes, sir.
And you yourself created these swabs
Yes, sir, I did.
and placed them into evidence?
Yes, sir.
Do these items appear to be in the same condition as when you placed them into evidence?
Yes, sir.
This time, the state removed state's exhibits AA through FF into evidence as state's exhibits 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28.
Mr. Morley? Mr. Bankowitz?
No objection.
Ms. Hawthorne?
Your Honor, can we approach?
Is it same objection?
No, sir, this is a slightly different one.
Okay. You may approach.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Who? Her? Yeah.
Okay, I'm handing you its evidence, states CC, Exhibit CC. That envelope, you indicated in your testimony that there were 2 shell casings that you did swaps of.
Yes, ma'am.
Were those shell casings identified individually?
I sub-labeled the shell casings myself. In here, they are separate swabs, and on each swabs, the shell casing is sub-labeled as to how I sub-labeled them. So one of them is labeled number 1, and one of them is labeled number 2.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No more questions.
Do you still have an objection? No objection?
No objection.
All right. State's Exhibit AA for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 23. State's Exhibit BB for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 24. State's Exhibit CC for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 25. State's Exhibit DD for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 26. State's Exhibit EE for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 27. And State's Exhibit FF for identification will be received as State's Exhibit 28.
Ms. Peavy, Kinsey, on September 13, 2015, did you go to the Marion County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Division?
Yes, sir, I did.
While there, did you interact with the gentleman you now know to be Laquan Barrow.
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you see that gentleman here in court today?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe his clothing for the jury?
It's the gentleman in the red shirt with the red and blue tie.
May the record reflect that the witness has identified.
No objection,
All
or
right.
we'll stipulate, sorry.
And the record will so reflect.
What was the purpose of your going there to and interacting with Mr. Barrow?
I was requested by former major of the Major Crimes Division, Tommy Bibb. He requested I take photographs, a gunshot residue kit, fingernail swabs, and buccal swabs from Mr. Barrow.
I want to speak to you right now about the gunshot residue kit. Can you tell the jury how it is that you go about collecting a gunshot residue kit from somebody?
We have gunshot residue kits. In order to collect that from a person or an individual, I follow the guidelines set forth within this kit. I use a very small stamp, and it has a sticky end on the edge of it, and I use one for each hand, and I will just take that sticky part and just kind of place it along the person's hand, sort of in this area, but also sometimes in the underside area, and I do that one for each hand.
And when you say in this area, just so the court reporter is able to describe what
Yes.
you're doing. If you're holding your hand out in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
palm down, hand open, what areas are you swallowing?
Thumb and index finger in that groove area of the thumb and index finger.
Like the fingernail of the pointer finger?
Yes, sir.
Index finger down to the thumb?
Yes, sir.
Did you explain to Mr. Barrow how you would go about collecting gunshot residue from him?
Yes, sir, I did.
At what time did you collect the gunshot residue kit?
May I refer to my report, sir?
Yes, or let me actually do you one better.
Okay.
And the record reflect that show defense counsel Mr. Martinez states exhibit GG. Excuse me, let me show you those Martinez states exhibit GG. You recognize that?
Yes, sir, I do.
What is it?
This is the gunshot residue kit that our agency is provided with, and I recognize it based off of my handwriting, my old last name, as well as my sheriff's office ID number.
Does that item indicate what time it was that you collected the kit?
Yes, sir, it does.
And did you make that notation?
Yes, sir.
What time was it that you collected it?
The left hand at 10:56 and the right hand at 10:57.
Prior to collecting it, did you ask Mr. Barrow whether he had washed his hands since 1:30 in the morning?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did he tell you?
His answer was no.
That he had not washed them?
Correct.
Did you ask him what he did for a living?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did he tell you?
That his occupation was maintenance at Checkers.
Okay. Did you ask whether he had any hobbies?
Yes, sir.
What did he tell you his hobbies were?
Football.
And did you ask him what he had done since 1:30 in the morning?
Yes, sir.
What did he tell you?
That he went home.
Now, after taking what you describe as a stamp with a sticky end on it and stamping around Mr. Barrow's left hand and right hand, what do you actually do with the stamp?
I then will place it back into this envelope sealed, and these questions that I asked were also provided in the kit, so they're also guidelines that go along with, that coincide with collecting gunshot residue.
And after you get it and you put it back in the envelope, do you seal the envelope up?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now, the item I've handed you states exhibit GG.
Yes.
Is that the gunshot residue kit you collected from Laquan Barrow on September 13, 2015?
Yes, sir, it is.
And does that item appear to be in the same condition as when you placed it into evidence?
Yes, sir.
This time the state removed state's exhibit GG into evidence as state's exhibit
29.
29.
No objection.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit GG for identification will be received in evidence as State's Exhibit 29.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
In these items that you collected, the latent fingerprint cards of possible value, the swabs containing possible DNA, and the gunshot residue kit, those are all forwarded on to other people for further analysis?
I can't answer that. Once I place items into evidence, I don't know where they go from there.
You don't do any further analysis on it yourself?
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Gorley, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. My understanding is that you performed the GSR test in CID room number 1.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell the jury what CID stands for?
The Criminal Investigation Division.
Okay. And can you walk me through how you get to room 1 in the CID building
From,
from the parking lot?
there are multiple parking lots.
Okay.
The building is kind of confusing from my area, my crime scene area, which is where I was at the time when I got the phone call.
I'm talking about an individual that gets to that room. How would they get to that room?
I'm not sure. Deputies take.
If you were coming from the outside of the building, how would you get to that room?
I could go towards in the front. There's a side entrance. There's a back entrance.
Okay.
There are multiple key card entrances.
All right. And as part of those entrances, are there door handles or knobs that you would be touching or moving?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know how many approximately doors or entryways there is from the back entrance to room number 1 CID?
The back entrance, which is from our Emergency Operations Center, I would say 2 to 3.
Okay. And from the front entrance?
1. Well, 2, including the front door and then the key card entry door, so 2.
And do those have door handles on them?
Yes, sir, they do.
Now, are you yourself required to undergo any type of firearm training?
No, sir.
Okay. Are Marion County deputies required to undergo firearm training?
I can't answer that.
Okay. I don't have any idea. I've ever heard them having to be certified or recertified.
I can only make an assumption, but
You've heard that before, then I take
I
it.
have heard it.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming that you're aware that these deputies carry firearms.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm assuming also that you're aware that these deputies enter and exit those rooms that lead to CID, room number 1, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As part of conducting the GSR test, Mr. McCord asked you as to the questions that you asked Mr. Barrow.
Yes, sir.
And I believe one of the questions that you asked him was, do you have any hobbies?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall if you asked him whether or not he was a fisherman or whether he fished?
I did not.
Okay. Do you recall if you asked him whether he was a hunter or he hunted?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. So in that regard, the only question that you asked him was, do you have any hobbies, correct?
Correct.
And he responded as football.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, as part of your contact with Mr. Barrow, you took some photographs of him, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you also made notations in your report as to whether or not he had any injuries, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what does your report say in that regard as to injuries?
I did not see any injuries on Mr.
Okay.
Barrow.
In addition to your documenting those things, you also documented his attitude, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall what you indicated as to Mr. Barrow's attitude when you were performing these tests?
Yes, he was very calm throughout my entire interaction with him.
Now, as part of Mr. McCourt's examination of you, he indicated, or he asked you how many people had access to your testing area,
Yes, sir.
okay? And I believe you responded with 3 types of individuals, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and I think I got them right, but if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Okay.
A crime scene technician,
Yes, sir.
is the second one an evidence technician, or are they the same?
Same thing, yes, sir.
Okay. And the third one would be your supervisors, or the second one could be your supervisors?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm missing a third one. Who are the third one?
DNA technicians.
DNA
who are
tech-
also cross-trained for crime scene.
Okay, DNA technicians. All right. Do you have a number as to the amount of crime scene technicians that work for the sheriff's office?
At this time, there were either 5 or 6.
Okay. And as to DNA technicians?
2.
Okay. And are those two separate than the 5 or 6? Because you said some are cross-trained.
Yes, sir.
So 2 additional?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as to your supervisors, you indicate how many supervisors?
Trying to remember at this time, I believe there were only 2 of them, a lieutenant as well as a sergeant.
Okay. Have you gotten an additional, or did they get an additional supervisor?
They change frequently. So they now have a captain in that division. So
Okay. So now it might be 3?
yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So we're at a total of, if my math is correct, potentially 9 to 10 people that have access to the sterile testing area.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Hawthorne?
Yes, sir.
Mr.
No
Banks?
additional questions, Judge?
Any redirect? Is the witness excused? All right, you can go about your business. Thank you.
She
Coun-
will be recalled later in the trial.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, council approach. Are you good? Can't say anything until she's ready. All right, ladies and gentlemen, half of you had a very long day yesterday, along with me and a good portion of the attorneys and parties. Rather than keep pushing at this point, I'm inclined to give you a little break this afternoon and let you go home early, a little early today. Ordinarily, we would work closer to 5 o'clock and then sort of find a breaking point either right before 5 or right after 5. I cannot promise you there won't be days that we go later. Based on the progress that we made today, and I do think good progress was made today, I think we're on track to having this case to you by the middle of next week. So I'm going to go ahead and recess for the day. I ask you to recall the many times I've told you what not to do when you leave the courthouse. Certainly try to avoid anyone that might impart information to you. The local newspaper's been in attendance, so stay away from the Ocala Star Banner. Stay away from the Star Banner's website, ocala.com. Again, probably should stay off of Facebook because people will post what they read. The newspaper posts on Facebook. So there has been television media. There may be video on Channel 2 and Channel 9. And the trial itself has been live streamed on a YouTube channel. So stay off the internet unless you're going to ESPN. I mean, that's probably the only place, or CNN perhaps, I don't know. But at any rate, just be careful who you talk to and what you watch. Okay? But with that, have a very pleasant evening, and I will see you tomorrow. We will try to start promptly at 9 tomorrow, if not a little before. I can get everybody organized and ready to go. All right? Have a good evening.